Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 87, the beginning of season 6 of the Dads and Ed podcast. We are all rested up from our wonderful summer break. Now we're exhausted because it's beginning of school, but we're excited to be back. We have a great show, as always. I mean, that's kind of what you come to expect with us after 87 episodes.
Right.
Excited to be here. Excited to meet Jesse Lubinsky. I have not met him. This is one that Devin hooked up for us, so I'm always excited to meet new people. So, Josh Allen, Tech Integration Specialist from Lewis Central, had a couple birthdays since the last show, so we're now pulling in at 10, 8, 5, and 2.
You had a couple of birthdays since then.
No, some days I feel like it.
Not that long.
We added a new one to school. We now have 3 kids in school.
That's crazy.
The quote so far of school was a week ago Sunday. The kindergartner says, "I wish it wasn't church day. I wish it was school day." And the 2 older ones go, "Just shut up. Nobody wants to hear it."
Give it a few years.
Yeah, that'll wear off. We'll educate that out of you. I am currently flying solo. 3 of my 4 kids are in bed. The baby of the family, I have turned over the old iPad to her, and hopefully she'll stay quiet while we're doing this. If you hear Daniel Tiger in the background, that'd be her.
Things will be just fine. There's no worries there. I think your kids have it under control.
Yeah, probably more so than their dad.
That's probably true.
Breaking news. So we are just crossed 3 minutes in, and we already have a comment from Superfan Bill.
Wow.
Wondering how much tech Devin broke over the summer.
For crying out loud, Bill.
Oh, he's on point. He is in mid-season form at the beginning of season 6.
You know, the thing is, I think he's been building. He had that thing typed out 3 weeks ago. Just waiting for the moment to go ahead and click submit.
That's how Bill spent his summer break, is coming up with zingers for Devin.
That's why he sent me a message today saying, "Hey, when's Dad's and Ed back?" He was just waiting. I should have told him a different date. He wouldn't have known. Welcome back, Bill. Good to see you. Devin Schoeding in Council Bluffs, Iowa, instructional technology program lead, something like that, in Council Bluffs schools. 2 great kids. Got a high schooler now. We're going to pick up the school permit tomorrow so she can drive herself to 5:30 cross-country practice in the morning. So I don't do it. I'll tell a good story about that in Dads and Ed in a little bit here. And Claire is in 7th grade, and I have maybe the best wife in the world. I was coming home from open gym tonight, and she texted me, and she said, we were having breakfast sandwiches for dinner. She's like, "Would you have you want me to have one ready for you when you get home?" Because I hadn't had dinner yet. I said, that would be just lovely. So there was a warm breakfast sandwich and a bowl of fruit waiting for me when I got home.
Wow.
So I could chomp it down in the 7 minutes that I had before the show started. So pretty excited about that.
That is great. Well, and I'll have to say, Jim York already checking in. It's great to hear back from everybody. Rob Lindquist sent us a Europe tweet with the final countdown on it when I sent out that we would be out. We start in a half hour or something like that. So good to have the gang back together for another fantastic season. So,
you know who never checks in?
Who doesn't check in?
Brent.
He does not. That would be nice to have that part of the gang back together as well.
Right. Even if he can't be on the show, it'd be nice to get a tweet every once in a while.
Yeah. Hey, Callet, anytime. Well, okay. Let's be fair to Brent. We have not had a show since May.
That is true.
So he has referenced listening to the show. So we do know that he does listen on occasion. He's driving all over the Midwest, so he's got plenty of time to listen to the wonderful stuff we put out.
Well, we'll see how closely he listens.
Yeah. Well, if you're Brent Callet or anybody else, you can connect with the show via Twitter at Dads and Ed. You can use the hashtag Dads and Ed also. It was up and running over the summertime. Right. Great to see all the back to school picks for everybody.
Yep.
If you missed part of the show, go check out the website dadsanded.com. You should by now. This is season 6. you should have already been subscribed in iTunes or Google Play. I probably should go double check, make sure everything's still working. I mean, so far so good, but Facebook randomly took a chop out of connections over the weekend. So hopefully you can go search Dads and Ed. I'm pretty sure we're still the #1 search hit when you search Dads and Ed. Make sure and make it 3 words though. So we're a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Check them out at edupodcastnetwork.com. They are adding new podcasts all the time, including possibly one this week, which you'll know more about later. So there's that's called a tease in the business. What I studied over the summertime, how to do a tease in a podcast. All right, so this is what is this? This is Labor Day week, 2018. NFL season starts tomorrow night. If you did not know, Nike is the supplier now, and I think for the last year or two, of NFL jerseys. If you even somewhat follow the NFL or politics, you've heard of NFL players who have taken a knee in what they say is a protest against police brutality, among a number of other issues, specifically, I would say mostly dealing with minorities. The opponents of that act would say that it's disrespectful to the military. They would say it's disrespectful to the flag. Whichever side you fall on that. This week, Nike announced that Colin Kaepernick, former quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers and one of the first players to start shedding a light in this way of kneeling, is you say that he's the face, one of the main focuses of Nike's 30th anniversary Just Do It ad.
Right.
He's on there. Serena Williams is on there. Shaquem Griffin, is that his name? Former UCF linebacker who only has one hand, but it was announced today actually that he is going to start in his first ever NFL game for the Seattle Seahawks in his rookie season. So that's kind of what the main focus of Nike's new ad is. They're going back to their Just Do It from 30 years ago. They're talking about overcoming obstacles, which before the show, Deb and I were trying to think. We're pretty confident they've done similar ad campaigns, I guess, like this about overcoming obstacles. And but this one has kind of really hit close to home. I think #1 because Kaepernick has been very divisive amongst society. And in my opinion, I think the big thing that takes another step further is that Colin Kaepernick, let me take a quick step back. Colin Kaepernick has a lawsuit out against the NFL saying that the owners are colluding against him to keep him from playing, essentially blackballing him from the NFL. And now the official uniform supplier of the NFL is using that same person in their ad. So, Devin, I know that you kind of had a lengthy response online about this, but what was your reaction when you saw this?
Yeah, well, I guess first I was surprised. I was surprised that Nike took that stand, knowing full well what they were getting themselves into. Right? I mean, they didn't just jump into that with no idea. They certainly knew there was going to be some pushback. And so I was kind of happy to see that. And I haven't made it. I've made it pretty well known. I mean, either online or in person that I support what they're doing, but I also support the right of people to kind of disagree with that and say, I think you're wrong. And the problem I guess I have is that issues get conflated, and people make arguments that don't necessarily have any real relationship to the actual the actual issue. And so when we start talking about, the flag and the military, I think it's been pretty clear from everybody involved that it has nothing to do with the military. I always go back to, when Kaepernick first started his protest and he was sitting, he got a lot of pushback from military members. And so what he did was he went and talked to some of them and talk to one who said, help me figure this out. I'm going to do it. This is a foreign protest I'm taking. How can I do it more respectfully? And got the idea to kneel from a military member. And I think that's a good thing. And I guess the other piece of that is that, people will say that the NFL owners have the right to say their players will stand during the national anthem or they won't kneel. And I guess that's absolutely right. I don't agree with it. I don't think they should make that, but they can say that. And what that ends up doing is putting the onus back on players. If I'm an owner and I say you will stand and you don't stand, I can fine you. I can say we'll cut you. I'll say we can do all kinds of things, but the market will then take over. So if I get fired from my team for not standing, there's a team out there who might give me a shot, and maybe not. I mean, Kaepernick's a pretty good example. Maybe that's not going to happen, but I just really get upset when issues get conflated, and we don't stick to what the problem is. Because if I'm being honest, when I see people kind of against this form of protest, I see them as being against the point that these players are trying to make, which is that there are injustices that people of color kind of face in this country every day, and they seem to be taking a stand against that being true, and I think that can be problematic.
Yeah, I think all too often the opponents want to say, well, you shouldn't be doing that, but they don't really want to address the actual problem.
Yeah,
like you mentioned, they don't want to deal with the fundamental issue.
Right.
Of how people are being treated. I saw something the other day about a police officer that tased an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know the whole story.
Right.
But I know a lot of police officers. They could kick my butt. And they use a taser on an 11-year-old minor. Like I don't understand that part of it. I don't understand how they get to that. So the other thing, you brought up, the market dictating where those players go. If you're an owner and you come out very much against that, you could really lose out in free agency.
Sure.
Yeah, you can draft players, but are the people on your team really going to want to play for you? Or are you going to get free agents, to improve your team? So
right.
You might have some that end up like Kaepernick, and I feel like there's another one that has a similar grievance out there. I can't think of who it is now. And I don't know. Like, this is the part that I always kind of come back to is, Colin Kaepernick did not have a great year his last year.
Sure.
It was not as good. Let me put it this way. It was not as good as years past. The point the counterpoint to that I've heard is that, well, there's still 32 teams. Yeah. They mentioned like the Buffalo Bills are starting some guy that I've never heard of, and I am a huge college football fan.
Right.
I can tell you where most of the NFL starters came from.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this guy before.
You don't know where Nathan Peterman came from?
No, I couldn't even think of his name. I knew. Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. Yeah. And that was kind of their point. Like, you can't. You're really going to sit down and tell me that Colin Kaepernick is worse than the 3 quarterbacks that the Cleveland Browns have, or the Buffalo Bills have? Well, he's not better than Josh Allen, but I mean, that's a whole other story. Yes. But I mean, pick a bottom team. You can't tell me that he can't help you. Even if he's not the starter. I mean, RG3 just got signed by somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's amazing. I do agree. I've been a lifelong Nike fan. When we were growing up, that was kind of the big thing, is the shoe wars were just starting. I've long been a Nike fan. I continue to be a Nike fan. Jim York chiming in, things like the Kaepernick NFL thing give us as dads and educators the opportunity to discuss proper discourse in these situations. We can disagree, but still get along. I think that's huge.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I argue online a lot. I end up getting myself in some kerfuffles that I probably don't need to be in. But it is that idea that we have good, honest, open dialogue and discourse. And really what has happened is, the hyper partisanship, the hyper partisan world that we live in almost doesn't allow that sometimes, because we end up making all these other arguments. It's, well, they should, protests should be done a different way. Well, why? Says who? And if I'm an NFL player and I know that one of the things I can do is do something, again, he's doing it peacefully and quietly. But I know I can do it and kind of start a conversation. I think that's great. I've got some friends who will argue that, well, they should be out doing things instead of just kneeling. They are. Like, there are lots of players who are not only donating their money, but their time in trying to improve relations in their communities. And a lot of that stuff doesn't get the press, nor are they looking for it to. But you know what? If they hadn't done this, so if Colin Kaepernick had originally, when decided to do this, if he had decided some other avenue for doing that, he was going to do it on his own time on a Tuesday afternoon in downtown San Francisco, do we have the same conversations we're having now? No. Probably not. No. So I think you use the platform that you have if you really believe passionately in it. And the other thing I'll say is the ad that says, be willing to stand for something, even if it means sacrificing everything. The fact that people are kind of morphing that into, soldiers are the ones who really sacrifice everything. Nobody's arguing that these two things are the same, right? Nobody's arguing that Colin Kaepernick is giving up the same thing that our soldiers and law enforcement officials do on a daily basis. But somehow that becomes the meme moving forward. Pat Tillman gave up everything. These police officers in our communities gave up everything, and they did. But nobody's saying that Colin Kaepernick is giving up his life. But he was willing to stand up for something, and it did cost him professionally and probably personally. He is looked at as villain number one by lots of people in the country. Yeah,
this is definitely an issue that isn't going away, unfortunately.
No.
And I mean, unfortunately, in that, some of the issues that were brought up, still are occurring, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And like you said, the hyper partisan society, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon either. So
no, I think that's unfortunate.
All right. Well, it's been a while since we had a dad moment of the week. We have lots to choose from. I will say we went on vacation to Galveston, Texas. We actually stopped in Dallas to meet with some friends of my wife's and talking to her husband. And he described Galveston perfectly. It's on the ocean. It is a beach town. It is not glitzy. It is not glamorous. It is a beach town. And that is right up our alley. Our kids absolutely loved it. They would just lay on their boards in the water for hours at a time. My 2-year-old, who was, I guess, 1 at the time, was not a fan of the water, but was a huge fan of the sand, and just would do that over and over and over and over and over again. So that was a fantastic week down there. It was good to kind of unplug a little bit. The kids enjoyed it. We actually got a new van before we drove down there, so it was the first big ride in the van, because the other one crapped out on us, fortunately, before we left town. But yeah, it was a great vacation. Galveston's the closest beach to us, closest ocean. So it was, it's only a 2-day trip instead of a 4-day trip like it is to either one of the coasts. So
right.
Not really. That's not kind of how we landed on it. I mean, my wife's got friends down there. It kind of worked in our schedule. So anyway, it's a good summer. How about you?
Yeah, it looked like it was great. I have a couple of quick things. First, I have to commend my daughters and my wife for taking care of me over the summer. In June, I ruptured my patellar tendon, had to have surgery. Had a few weeks where I wasn't able to do much in terms of being up, so mowing the lawn, doing all that stuff. So I was kind of babied for a lot of the summer by my family, which was kind of nice. I'm not gonna lie. But back to getting things ready. The other thing I'll share is, we talked about driver's permits and all that stuff. I know in the last part of last season, kind of in the spring, and now tomorrow I will take Gracie to the DMV after school, and we'll get that school permit, which gives her the right to drive by herself, into school or to school events, which I'm not sure I'm ready for that either. But I will be ready for it in the mornings because she has cross-country practice at 5:30 a.m., which means I'm getting up before 5, which is no bueno for me. So having her drive herself into practice is going to be pretty sweet too, though.
Yeah, I could imagine that.
Oh, so I know the story is going to tell real quick. Another kind of dad moment. So we live probably, it's about 25 minutes to the school. Her cross-country practice starts at 5:30. They're usually done about 6:45. School starts at 8:10. And so lots of days she will come home after practice. So my options are I go in, drop her off, come all the way home, go all the way back in, come all the way home again, go back to school. So I've kind of reserved myself now to I find a dark place and sleep in my car for an hour. And I was almost positive the cops were getting called on me the other morning. Again, about 5:30 in the morning, this guy parked in a car and these two women go walking by. I don't know why they were up walking at 5:30 in the morning, but they were. And I was sure that the police were going to be there moments after, but it's kind of become lore now. I've got other parents talking about how I sleep in my car in the morning. So I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but that's where we're at.
Depends on how they're trying to frame that conversation there. Man.
Yes, it is.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to be joined by Jesse Lubinsky. Jesse is Director of Tech and Innovation and the Chief Info Officer for Irvington Union Free School District in Irvington, New York. He's an author. He's a speaker, as well as what I learned is you are an international man of mystery. Normally, we would put in like a sponsor at this time who didn't really agree to be a sponsor. We just kind of throw something in. I didn't even know who would sponsor an international man of mystery. So explain to me where I went wrong with that.
Straight out of the 60s. Well, first, I just want to say I'm super psyched to be on the season premiere.
That's right.
The show, right? It's a big deal. You're opening big this season.
That's right. We got a new budget over the summer. So
budget for sponsors?
Yeah, and yes. Oh wait, no, not yes. Never mind. Sorry.
Funny. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I was really excited when you guys asked me to come on.
Yeah, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? So, our podcast is really kind of this, looking for many times who we have on are people who are dads who are also in education. But tell us a little bit about, Josh said a little bit about what you do in your school district, but a little bit professionally, a little bit about your family. What do we want to know about you?
So I'll give you a little, the quick background is I actually came to education through a little bit of a circuitous route. I came out of college as a technology consultant for Fortune 500 companies. Then I made my way into education through the New York City Teaching Fellows Program, which is kind of like Teach for America, but you go teach in high-need cities in the inner city. I went and taught middle school in the Bronx. I couldn't decide what to teach. I was like, I don't know, elementary kids are so young. High school kids are too big. Middle school is perfect. It's right in the middle. It shows you how little I knew about education. So I did that for a couple of years and then actually moved to Irvington, which is the district where I teach now, or where I work. I taught there for 4 years. I was their computer programming teacher, and I was a math teacher at the middle school and high school levels. And then I moved into my current role of Director of Technology and Innovation, and this is my 11th year in that role. So otherwise, in terms of family life, married to another career changer who went into education, and she's now a school administrator in White Plains, New York. And we have 3 kids. I have a 13-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old son, and an almost 2-year-old daughter. So big spread.
People always ask what stage of life I like the best, and I love them all. I mean, I think it's fun to see. I have a 2-year-old as well, and just their excitement over the craziest things. My 2-year-old's new fascination is water towers. When she sees a water tower, it's like the most amazing thing she's ever seen. So, I think it's fun to have it all kind of spread out like that.
I mean, I'll be honest, we had a girl, we had a boy. I was like, all right, cool. We're done. Great. My son's older. My wife's guilting me about, you missed out on all these experiences and I feel bad about myself. And then here I am again. I feel like this is like bonus time, right? This is every second I get here with the baby feels like this time that I wasn't supposed to have in the first place. So it's great. Yeah. It's uniquely different than the first two in a really kind of liberating, great way. And it's cool because I share interests with each kid. Well, definitely with the two older ones, like discrete interests that I have with them. Like my daughter's a huge foodie. She actually has a food blog. It's one of the things I talk about when I travel. It's her food blog that she's been running since she's in 3rd grade. She's now in 8th grade. My son, we go to Comic-Con together. So it's cool, to have your kids grow up, be able to share interests with them. It's pretty awesome.
We were talking. Go ahead, Devin. Sorry.
No, I was going to say you're talking about kind of these hobbies and things. One of my favorite moments of the summer, and again we talk about this all the time, but the great thing about social media is being able to kind of know people in a different way than we would if we didn't have it. And your alphabet aerobics rap with your daughter was one of my favorite moments of the summer.
I appreciate. So here's the background on that. So I don't know if you're familiar with Black Alicious's Alphabet Aerobics. It's a really complex rap. Daniel Radcliffe actually did it on the Jimmy Fallon show. And my daughter was bat mitzvahed in June. And, we were like, what can we do that's a little bit different? We didn't want to do like the normal, daddy-daughter dance. So I jokingly was like, oh, we should do Alphabet Aerobics. And we laughed about it. And then it was one of those, you laugh about it and you look at each other like, well, maybe. And so we actually rehearsed it for 2 months and totally nailed it. And actually the cool thing was, I don't know if this was on social media, she actually traveled with me to Australia. I did 2 keynotes. I did a keynote in Sydney and a keynote in Melbourne. And she came with me and we did that as a demo slam. So, you have 3 minutes for a demo slam. The song's a little bit, it's 2:20. And so I basically was like, you know what? I'll just make a slide deck, Google A through Z. We'll have a tool for each letter. And as we go through the rap, I'll just flip from letter to letter. And so I got to win a demo slam with her, which is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, and you say you nailed it. You guys did. I'm not kidding. That it was absolutely one of my favorite things that I've ever seen.
It was one of my proudest moments, probably as a human being. So
yeah, so nailed it. So great.
That is awesome. Well, we were kind of talking the other day, and you mentioned being in Australia with your daughter. What other big travels you got coming up?
So I feel like I was gone most of the summer, so it's actually been nice to be home for a while. I did actually have a couple kind of exciting things. One's not a traveling thing. One is a traveling thing. The thing that's not a traveling thing is I literally just finished recording our 2nd episode of a podcast that's launching this Friday. It's called Partial Credit. It is a podcast about education with some pop culture and shenanigans mixed in. And I'm doing that with my good friends Jeff Heil from San Diego and Donnie Piercy from Kentucky. And our teaser just launched. You could actually check it out at partial.credit. Did you know .credit was an extension? I mean, how cool is that?
No,
I saw you.
Partial.credit. That's it.
When you sent that to me the other day, I was like, oh, that link's not going to work. And I clicked on it. I'm like, oh, it does work. That's nice.
And luckily, the podcast feed sites actually take it. I was worried that we wouldn't take the RSS feed. It works. It's great. It's fantastic. So our first episode actually launches this Friday. The teaser's out. We did a 5-minute teaser. The first full episode launches this Friday. I'll just let you know that the premise of the first episode is in honor of the school year and fantasy football season, to celebrate those 2 things, we did a little fantasy draft. We drafted from 90s movies our ideal school staff, with the rules being that we had to draft 1 administrator, 2 teachers, and then a flex. So that's our first episode. We're then leaving it up to our listeners to vote for who drafted the best school staff. I won't tell you who I took. I will tell you I had the first pick. That was a controversial pick. It was widely panned. I still am going to stand by it, but definitely check it out. We're super excited about it.
That is great. I would love to see Roger Goodell come out with that. Ladies and gentlemen, with the first pick in the Partial Credit 90s Teachers Draft, Jesse picks. Find out on Friday.
I actually decided on that it was going to be a 90s movie draft. And then I literally had a draft board. We're all super competitive. So once we decided we're going to do this, we're all taking it super seriously. And I'm like going down my draft board. I'm about to pick first. And I'm like pulling up the movie information so I can talk about my pick. And it was 2000. So there, I basically eliminated my first pick. So I had to scramble to come up with this other pick. It was a lot of fun. I'm actually excited to hear it because you know how this works. You record it, you don't really hear it, it gets published, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, so that's what it was.
That's what it was.
Oh, that's what it was. So yeah, that's we've been talking about doing this for a while. I think we've just been listening to what's out there, trying to fill a hole in the space, I guess, so to speak. We talked about the kind of podcast we like to listen to. How can we make that connection to EDU? And we're giving it a go. So definitely excited to get some feedback from people. We're on Twitter at Partial Credit Ed. So yeah, we're excited to have people listen and give some feedback.
Well, and that's I listened to the teaser. It is good. It's going to be funny. There's no doubt with the three of you. It's going to be an interesting listen. And I was interested to hear you talk about it. You talked about creating this podcast for a while. And maybe filling a bit of a void, or what you see as a void in that space, with as many people that, it seems like podcasting is that thing now, right? So for a while, maybe it was blogging, and podcasting kind of gets to that space now where people just kind of put content out there. So why did you then, or how did you come up with the idea? Like, what was the process? Were you guys just throwing things against the wall to see what would stick? You obviously wanted to do something where you could hang out and talk. That's really why Josh and Brent and I initially started this. How did that thing work for you?
That's what it is, right? Yeah. So really, even as I was recording the episode a few minutes ago, as we were talking, I'm just thinking, I'm like, this is cool. Like, I have this time locked in with my friends every week to talk about the same stuff we would talk about. So the idea actually came about. Donnie and I were messaging. This was probably not February 2018, probably February 2017. And we were actually just like talking about the podcast we listened to, a lot of like Bill Simmons and stuff, probably same stuff you listen to also. And, we're just talking about how much we love, and we're like, dude, I wish like there was a podcast like about that for education, where it was like, it'd be cool if we sprinkled in sports, talked about pop culture, just like one of our conversations. What if you were just hanging out in a room with us? What would that sound like for 30 minutes? Because we do actually share a lot of resources and kind of interesting articles, things like that. So I think what we're trying to figure out now is what's the balance between like the silliness, the fantasy type drafting kind of things, and also like what we just recorded, our second episode, which is more, sharing some resources for educators, some silliness, trying to figure out that balance. And I think we'll get it over time. I think we're still trying to find our voice, but I know that so far it's been a fun, if you're having fun doing what you're doing, then you're probably doing the right thing, right? So
yep.
I think there's a lot of that to this. So as we start to make our way through it, I think as long as we're having fun and, people are getting something out of it, I think we'll keep, plugging away and kind of improving.
Quick on the draw, superfan Bill says, Devin, you're the flex. You'd be his flex. He put that I would be staff. I responded back that I wasn't teaching in the 90s. So sorry about that.
Neither was I. But
well, he said me either. I assume that you were not, but so we would have to, Bill, if we did that, we would need further guidelines on how that would work.
Yeah. He's going to need to give us a little more if he wants to jump in on that and make us part of the draft. So
yeah, tonight's episode was a little there was a little tension at the beginning because Donnie does actually run our fantasy league, and he absolutely it was a travesty what happened in this year's draft. He switched platforms, made lineup changes without telling anybody. So like, in the draft, it's the third round. I take Travis Kelce, which I'm totally happy with it. And then I look at my lineup, and there's no tight end spot. So I'm like, what league are we in that does not have a tight end spot? There's some weird head coach spot. I didn't even know what was happening. I was like, how does this happen? So I wasn't going to bring it up. He brought it up, and then we argued about it for a couple minutes. And I'm like, you know what? No one wants to hear this, and I don't think I'm ready to talk about it. I'm super competitive, and I don't like the fact that I have a tight end sitting on my bench now that I can't really use.
That you can't use. Right.
So I have a question. So I've been out of fantasy football because it really makes me mad for a while. How do you have a head coach spot? What do you get points for that?
So he added a head coach spot where you pick a coach or you pick a team, and essentially if the team wins, you get a point. It's nonsense. It's a point. It doesn't matter.
Get 15 for your tight end.
You get 15 points over the course of the year. It's ridiculous. But fortunately, someone did take Bill. He's a huge Patriots fan. Fortunately, someone took Bill Belichick before he could, just to kind of piss him off. So it was like totally. It was totally worth it.
If you're gonna throw in a head coaching spot, somebody better take his favorite.
So the other thing I am excited about this fall, and that this is a travel thing. I was just asked to be a coach for the Google Innovator Academy in Denmark. So that's taking place November 14th through 16th. If you're not familiar with the Google Innovator program, it's essentially the Google Certified Innovators program is a way for educators who have these big ideas that could change education to come and essentially workshop through the design thinking model, meet like-minded educators, and essentially receive support over the course of a year for helping to implement their big idea in education. So I've served as a mentor. I'm currently working with my fourth innovator over the past 3 years. So I've been working in that capacity for a while. I'm actually excited to get to go out to one of the academies and work with an entire group and help them develop their ideas. The program used to be called the Google Certified Teacher Program. I became one back in 2008 in the New York cohort, but it looked totally different back then. The way those days worked, it was like one day and you'd go and they'd be like, "This is Google Docs." And you're like, "That's amazing." What? Like, I remember they showed us the research tool and the room lost it. Right. Like, it can auto put citations in. It's crazy.
And now that's moved to 101.
Yeah. And now it's like the kind of thing where educators are like, I have this really huge idea. I know this can really help schools. How do I get this started? And we help them kind of set milestones, set goals, and really put it out there. So if you're interested in learning more about the program, www.certifiedinnovators.com. The deadline for applying is September 21st. And the only thing prerequisite you really need is you have to have passed the Google Certified Educator Level 2 exam, which is, if you use Google products, it's not a very difficult exam to pass. You could there's a bunch of training materials online for you to take a look at it. It takes like a couple hours to take the test.
Yeah, I would second that. That test is pretty easy to go through if you are a user, like you said. So, and the Innovator Academy is one of those things that's on my radar. I actually have a lot of my stuff done. I have not pulled the trigger yet.
Put in, man. Come to Denmark.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's gonna happen.
We'll have Danish, Apple, whatever kind you want.
Oh, I need one back in the Midwest again. I almost pulled the trigger to go to LA this summer, or apply to go to LA, but I don't know. One of these days, I will be there.
So just, from what I know of you guys and from what I've watched, prior episodes, you guys are already doing a big thing in education. So I think that, how do you take your idea, just make it a little bit bigger, expand your audience? Even something like that is something worthwhile to, consider. I think Devin made a great point about how podcasting is like the new frontier. Everyone's doing it. No one knows kind of who's listening, but it's kind of like the new blogging, right? We're all just putting ourselves out there, sharing ideas. I think it's a really great way to get to know some of the other people in education. I think for so many years prior to social media, we all felt like isolated in our own classrooms, in our own schools. I know when I first became a director of tech, for those first like 3 or 4 years before I was kind of really into social media, I felt super isolated. And I think when you're in these kind of roles, you have to be able to put yourself out there, and podcasting is just another way of doing that. And, the great part is most of us, we drive to work, right? So that's just something to do in the car.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of times people, get started and they're like, "Oh, that's it? Like, that's all there is to it?" I'm like, well, yeah, it's recording audio. If you want to go the full like Podbean and publish to iTunes and all that, you can, but you can also just put it in Google Drive and send the link to parents, or send the link out on Twitter. I mean, you don't You know, not everything has to be cinematic quality. And I think we say that because we're 87 shows in and we're still not there yet.
You know, the one other thing I'll add that you talk about educators putting their voice out there. I think it's just a great way even for getting kids to put their voice out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things we look for in our school, and you know, Devin actually had a chance to work with some of the kids from my school. So one of the things we're really making a big push on is increasing opportunities for student voice, choice, and agency. And you know, I look at something like this, or even on a micro level, a tool like Flipgrid or something that would actually empower kids to go ahead and, you know, throw out there, you know, get that chance to put their voice out there in a way that they couldn't really do previously.
Right. The one thing, Jesse, you know, we talk about, you know, kind of finding a niche or finding something, you know, a hole in the space is kind of, you put it earlier. One of the reasons that we started this is really to look at that. We had so many people that we talked to locally or when we were at conferences who kind of see this intersection of being parents and being educators, and how that can sometimes be really tough, and how sometimes it puts us in interesting spots. So one thing we always like to ask the really smart folks that we have on is, you know, how have those two things kind of impacted you? So how has being, even with your circuitous route to education and through education, how has being a parent impacted the way that you are as an educator, and kind of vice versa? You know, how has education and working in that field impacted you as a parent?
I actually feel like it's probably more of how being an educator has influenced how I am as a parent, more so than the other way around. Mm-hmm. I think it's very interesting to navigate through the educational system as a parent when you're kind of in the know. Mm-hmm. So, and it's even cooler when your wife is also, so like the fact that my wife's also a school administrator, and as we kind of receive these or watch the challenges or the things that happen with our own schools, meaning our own schools that our kids attend, mm-hmm. It's always interesting to read between the lines and kind of be like, so when you say this, I know what you're really saying.
Yeah.
And it's hard. In a way, it's kind of hard. It makes it, you know, more, but in a way, kind of having more knowledge is sometimes dangerous.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about that. I kind of have a project going on, like almost talking about exactly what you're talking about, which I'm not ready to share yet, but a project about like, how do we as educators take what we know and kind of share that with the broader populace? Like, so we know how we would love parents to, I think a lot of parents just don't, because they don't know the system, because they're not in schools, they don't know how to navigate or handle certain situations. And it creates really uncomfortable situations for us as educators, because then, you know, a parent may unwittingly not know what the protocol would be for who they should contact first. They contact the wrong person. It starts a whole bunch of miscommunications.
Right.
And so almost like, how do we let parents know, hey, this is kind of the insider secret for how you navigate school, right? Like this is the insider's guide to dealing with school.
Right. It's interesting.
So I feel like that's something I'm always very conscious of. And I'm a big talker, but oftentimes when we're at school, like, or at my kids' school, I kind of fall back into the letting my wife do the talking, because I'm almost like, even though I'm in a zone I'm very familiar with, being put into that parent role sometimes can be very disconcerting.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think it does help us in a way know how to advocate a little bit more for our kids in a way that might be more productive.
Yeah. Have your kids ever gone to either of yours or your wife's school system? Like, have they ever been in?
So it's so funny you say that. So we were just at the dinner table before. So no, the answer is no.
Yeah.
But we just talked about it. So, you know, my wife is fortunate in that she has the ability to bring our kids to her district for no cost if we wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, my wife's district is a very big school district, whereas our district's fairly large. But you know, based on the fact my wife's district size, they have a lot more course offerings that my daughter potentially could take. When I jumped in, I heard you guys talking about like logistics, like dad logistics.
Yeah.
The life I live between my daughter's a big swimmer. So that's like, I'm total swim dad, and we're always taking her to and from practice and meets. And so even just having that conversation, I talked about what some of the challenges would be about being in a district with your mom. It sounds cool, But guess what? There's benefits, but there's also downsides. And not living near. I went to high school in New York City. I went to high school in the Bronx. I grew up in Queens, so I had to take an hour subway ride each way to school. So I knew what it was like to not live near all of my fellow classmates.
Right.
That's not easy either. So it's something you really have to kind of try to balance.
Yeah, we've talked quite a few times, and we've done some sessions at conferences, actually at tech conferences, that have been all about the parenting aspect and being parents and being educators, which have gone over really, really well. It's been kind of interesting. But I work in the district where my kids go. Josh has worked in the district where his kids go, and we've talked about the struggles that brings on too. When you see things that you don't love, like, how do you approach that? Like, and I'm not in a position of any sort of authority over any of the teachers, but I do work at all the buildings in my district, and there is this weird dynamic then, figuring out how to address things that are going well and things that maybe aren't going so well without being that parent. You know what I mean? Like the one we all wouldn't want necessarily in our classrooms.
It's so hard sometimes, though. It's so hard. It's so hard when you get those emails sometimes and you're reading it and you're like, this is the email I would send if I was trying to get them to just be quiet. Like, you're like, I know what, wait a minute, I've written this email before. I know what this email is. So I think it's kind of twofold, right? I wish we had that. I wish it was a little bit easier to navigate, but I also wish that what you guys just said about presenting that at a conference. I love the idea of being able to share that insight that we have into the school system with our friends, our friends at home, who are also parents that really want the same thing for their kids that we want, but really just don't understand the best way to kind of get their point across. And you know what? There's always going to be parents who, it doesn't matter what you say, they're going to come in like the Ram and just like try to take bull in a china shop. And that's just an approach that some people have. And sometimes squeaky wheel gets the whatever. I don't know if you know what I was going for.
I know where you're going.
Yeah. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. But
it's definitely something I think about a lot. It's a challenge, and the older my kids get, the more I'm like, wow, this is not an easy. It's not easy to be the parent when you've like your Oz and you know what's behind the curtain.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jesse, we appreciate your time. We have a little sharing is caring segment. I know that you have shared a lot. If we give you a minute or two, can you come up with one more?
Sure. What's the frame?
Whatever. We used to do themes. Like if you go back to season 3 and 4, like we had themes, but it kind of got to the point where
this is season 6. Just share whatever you want.
Yeah, it's kind of like your last child. You're just like, yeah, whatever,
It could be a tool, it could be a book, it could be a video, it could be a blog post, it could be anything you want.
It doesn't even have to be educational.
It doesn't have to be. Mine will not be tonight.
Yeah.
Oh well, let me hear what you guys have. I have tons of stuff.
Mine is shamelessly self-promoting myself. So I haven't done. Listen, Devin, I haven't done this in a long time. I don't think
we haven't had a show in a long time.
It's the premiere. He gets to say whatever he wants now. It doesn't matter.
Anyway, this week,
season 6, no holds barred.
It is. That's true.
Exactly. This week, the Content Generation podcast released episode 7, starring yours truly. The Content Generation podcast is from our good friends at Class Intercom. We've mentioned Taylor Siebert on here before, who does the video streaming with Strive, and then the Class Intercom is the kind of like Hootsuite version that I know my district uses to have students post to our social media. It's one of our favorite things that we get to do. And I got to be on there talking a little bit differently about really my role in education and how we're using our social media interns from the high school. And just, I was kind of brutally honest about some of the things we're struggling with. And I tweeted out today, I was listening to it yesterday, and like in the middle of it, that, Amber Pankinen, who was doing the interviewing, who is just a fabulous person, she said, what are kind of some of your goals? And I said, we want to have the best social media in K-12. And that is an interesting statement because we don't have a communications department. It's not my full-time job.
That's true.
We have a lot of issues with getting there. But if I'm being honest, that's what we want to do. And, I talked a lot about one of our favorite blog posts I think we've mentioned here in regards to tech integration. Find that Bob Dylan, the only two-time guest on Dads and Ed, has said about find 5 people who do your job better than we do. And that was the other thing that I said is we constantly search out for people who are doing K-12 or any social media better than what we're doing and try and emulate some of them. So I will drop the links.
Was this Bob the Spacebook Dylan or Bob Mr. Green Man Dylan?
No, it's a Spacebook.
Okay.
Free Spacebook.
Just checking. I want to make sure.
Yes. So fun fact. Okay, hold on. I'll finish that, but I got to go back to that because we have a funny story about that. So I will tweet that out and be sure to follow Class Intercom because they're friends of the show. So back to Bob Dylan, who is one of our favorite people, to be honest with you. A couple of years ago at a tech conference, they had us, Dads and Ed, introducing the Ignite speakers. And Bob Dylan was one of them. So we put up Bob Dylan, the other Bob Dylan's picture. And then we said something like, oops, wrong one, and then switched to his actual picture.
Yeah.
He thought it was funny, I think.
He did. He did think it was funny. And that was actually one of the more fun things that we've done. Being up there doing that, allowing to crack jokes in front of a full ballroom of people was fun too.
Yeah, that we couldn't see. We think they thought it was funny.
We think they did. Doesn't matter if they did. So my sharing and caring is going to be a book, and really I'm going to share something about an idea that I had. So I my people are part of book clubs all the time, and they read books and they get together and they talk about them. And one of the things that I want to try to do is promote conversations about serious topics. Like we kind of a little bit like we had with the Colin Kaepernick stuff earlier. So I've started what we're calling a taking action club, not a book club, but we're going to read a book. And the book we're reading first is called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And so the idea is that we're going to read this book, and most of the people that are in it right now, I kind of put it out on Facebook, said, hey, anybody who wants to be part of this, let me know. And the idea is that we have a lot of people that are close to here, and we have some people that aren't so close. We're going to read the book together. We're going to share some things online. We are going to get together at the end of the book kind of for a face-to-face conversation, and the people that aren't close to us, we're going to Google Hangout them in or Skype them in or something. And then ultimately, the big idea is that we are going to take something that we learned from that book and do something in our communities to make our community a better place, either in some very, very small way or some very grand way, kind of depending on how that conversation goes. So I'm thrilled to kind of get started with this little project that I've been thinking about for a while. We start reading the book next week, and so we have a kind of a Facebook group that we're just using right now as kind of the housing place for that. And we're going to encourage people to have real open and honest conversations about race. We're going to get together face to face like the actual book club thing. But we're gonna take some sort of action in our community. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Very cool.
And
all right, Jesse.
They are welcome to be part of it.
I was about to say, I'm in. Send me the info after the podcast. And I'm pretty sure Jeff would be in too. I'll check with him, but I'm totally in. Love it.
No, done. I will send you the information. I'm pretty excited. I think it's gonna be pretty cool. And again, I'm hoping to promote just really open, honest conversations. I'm looking for people too, that might come in with some different viewpoints than I have. I'm not looking for an echo chamber to go to either. So I'm hoping to be challenged a little bit, hoping to challenge other people, and we'll see how it goes. Our plan is to kind of take on different topics like that through books over the next year or so, and see what we can do to our communities. So,
as we said, there can be disagreements with discussion.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right, Jesse.
All right. So one more time, I am just going to promote Partial Credit. So partial.credit. We launched this Friday. Actually, I heard you guys are going to be at iTech. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. With co-host Donnie Piercy.
Donnie Piercy is going to be there. I was told we were just asked to do a live podcast, so my head will be there. My head. doing a live podcast. Jeff and I will not be there, but our heads apparently will be there. So we're excited about, excited about that. We're going to bring something special to Iowa. Two quick things to share. One, movie, as you guys are talking about some stuff. 8th grade. Did you guys talk about that?
We haven't yet.
Okay. So quick story, and I apologize. I did just tell the story on our podcast, but so everyone's been talking about this Bo Burnham movie, 8th grade. It follows basically a girl through her last week of middle school in the 8th grade. Really gives you some insight into what the child, what a student's experience is like these days with social media, with social dynamics in middle school. I think we all know middle school is a rough time. I think we know social media has changed the game a little bit, but maybe we don't quite, even though we think we see it with our own kids, we don't really know. Mm-hmm. So based on what everyone told me, I'm like, wow, I should totally take my daughter, who's going into 8th grade, to see this movie. And kind of like Devin was saying, we should have a real open, honest conversation about this movie. So my wife and I take my daughter to this rated R movie, 8th grade. We're sitting there. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. We're going to have, so many things I never realized. That I feel like I have so much, as an educator, my mind's been opened up. And then I don't know how much you know about this movie. There's a scene. There's a scene, like I'm like, oh, it's rated R. I don't really know why. Oh, I didn't read the Common Sense Media review of this beforehand. So there's a scene where I'm not going to give away too much, but I will say that the our lead character goes to YouTube to search for information about a certain act that
makes a movie rated R.
Yeah, right? So that a female might perform. And I have to tell you, and this scene probably maybe it only lasted like a minute. It felt like it was like 20 minutes. And I've never wanted to not be in a room more than that moment. So I will say that at the end of the movie, we did have a really good conversation with my daughter about what the realities were for her. So there were things that really resonated with her in that movie, and other things that she felt were, maybe other kids experienced that, but not her. So I just felt like it was a really good way for me to not only get a sense of what our kids are dealing with, so to kind of help me professionally, but also really to get a good sense of where my daughter was. And, on a personal level, that's extremely valuable. Do I feel like I needed to sit through that exact thing to get that? I don't know. But
and pay the $10 a ticket or whatever it was.
Right, exactly. It was like, what just happened? So the last thing I'll share is a quick tech tool for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Look, I know that you guys have no time, right? Teachers don't have time. Whether you're watching this and you're like, I'm just a dad, I'm not an educator, you don't have time either. No one has time. And what's even worse is when you get those few moments where you have time, but then someone's trying to take up your time by like, I want to talk to you about this. You're like, I just don't have time. I don't want to talk to you. Well, I have something for you. It's a Chrome extension, and it's called Nope. Nope is a Chrome extension that you can install to help you get out of the conversations that you don't want to have. So all you do is you have the Nope extension installed. There's a little N up in your Chrome browser. When someone walks over to you and they're talking your ear off, and you're like, I need to get out of this conversation. You hit the N button, and oh, your phone's ringing. What? That's what it does. It calls your phone and tells you what facial expressions to make things that you don't want to have. So I find Nope to be an extremely valuable tool. I'm sure you will too.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of Chrome extensions that do great productivity type things. You know what? Get your time back, people.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. And sold very well. Also, the presentation there was well done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We will be sure to include a link to that in the show notes.
Thank you very much.
That is fabulous. Well, Jesse, again, we really do appreciate your time. We look forward to the Partial Credit podcast and seeing your head in Des Moines in a month and a half or so.
Thanks for having me on the season premiere of Dad's in Ed. I'm so super psyched to be here. Love it.
All right. We will see everybody in 2 weeks.